The carcinogenicity of the chemicals are determined by the two agencies' listing of carcinogenic chemicals, which are updated every year. So these two agencies are IARC and ACGIH listing of carcinogen chemicals. And then we have mutagens. Mutagens are chemicals classified as those chemicals which has the ability to change the DNA and RNA. So genetic changes can cause cancer, prevent normal biological functions, or may result in a malfunction of a particular organ. So these are the chemicals which are mostly, and as the name indicates, mutagens are very, very dangerous in terms of they can cause a genetic changes, genetic disorder, which can pass through in generations and generations. So as you might have known to the fact that the genetic disorders are not curable in most of the cases. And so these are the very severe kind of chemicals, which has the ability of mutagen ability. So example of these are benzene ionization radiation. It is a ionization radiation is a physical hazard, and then hydrogen peroxide. Then we have teratogens. These are the chemicals which disrupt the normal development of fetus, causing birth defects and even the healthy advancement of pregnancy. So female workers are mostly affected from these kind of chemicals. The hazard associated with these chemicals and the hazard associated is very, very severe in case of the fetus development, which there are certain examples which we have witnessed and which we have studied, that the presence of these chemicals in the workplace, and the workers, especially the female pregnant workers who are dealing with these chemicals in their workplace, has developed the birth defects. So God forbid, but these chemicals must be known, and that's why the classification of chemicals and the awareness about the chemicals which are used in the workplace is very, very important. And the same awareness should be communicated and transferred to all the levels of the workers who are working and who are even not exposed to these kind of chemicals, but they should be knowing that that our workplace, our organization is dealing with such and such chemicals, has the such and such ability to affect the human body, so that they can take care of themselves, and so that they can take the use of PPE and all the control measures very, very seriously. So the example of few are thalidomide, ionization radiation, and organic mercury compounds. So again, beside the chemical hazards which we are covering over here, which we have also one ionization radiation, which is a physical hazard over here. So it has the ability of causing the birth defects. So then we have one more category over here, which is reactive chemicals. So as the name indicates, and the guys who are dealing with most of the chemistry must be knowing that chemicals are mostly reactive. Reactive in the sense that some chemicals start their reaction as soon as they are exposed to the ambient environment. So I would like to give one example of the hydrogen gas. Hydrogen gas is reactive in the sense that it has a property of adiabatic property. Adiabatic property is the property in which if hydrogen gas is exposed to the atmospheric conditions, ambient environmental conditions, it does not be necessary that the ambient temperature is very high or very low, but the conditions which the ambient environment has, and if the hydrogen is exposed to hydrogen gas is exposed to that environment, it can abruptly explode. So the adiabatic reaction will start, and it can cause the explosion at the same time. So these chemicals cause chemical hazards such as explosion when mixed or combined with other chemicals or non-chemical substances such as water or air. Reactive chemicals are nitric acid, benzoyl peroxide, and saline. So mostly acids in their concentrated form are more likely to undergo these kind of reactions when exposed to or when mixed with water or air. Then we have flammable category. Flammability is a physical property of the chemicals which has the flash point or kind of categories in which the chemical, if exposed to the ambient environment, or if it is kept in the conditions, storage conditions, which is not appropriate, and to keep it in those conditions, it can undergo flammable reactions. Many chemicals are categorized as flammable as they can easily burn or ignite when exposed to oxygen. So when the fire triangle and all the appropriate conditions are met to these chemicals, they can ignite automatically and they can burn also. So these flammable chemicals are methanol, acetone, propane, and butane, which has to be kept in a very controlled environment and stored in very controlled environment. Then we have biological hazards of organic origin or conveyed by biological vectors, including pathogen microorganisms, toxins, and bioactive substances. Examples are bacteria, virus, and parasites, as well as venomous wildlife and insects, poisonous plants, and mosquitoes carrying diseases causing agents. Mosquito carrying diseases such as malaria, cerebral malaria, which are most common in countries in Africa, and the venomous wildlife and insects, for example, snakes and spiders in the workplace, for example, in the seismic reactions where people are and the crew are moving around in a vast areas, and which are not populated, and those areas has the habitat areas of venomous wildlife. So these snakes and scorpions and certain species of spiders are very deadly and very dangerous. So these hazards are usually as a result of natural occurrence, but can also result from deliberate or accidental release. So natural occurrence, as I have narrated, natural occurrence means the few of the areas are which has the population of snakes and scorpions. So automatically, if some project, if some drilling or if some seismic project comes in those areas, the workers working in those areas are very prone to these attacks. So these are the examples of biological hazards, which are viruses, toxins from biological sources, spores, fungi, and pathogenic microorganisms, bioactive substances. We have one more a webinar series in which one topic will cover bloodborne pathogens. So from these pathogen microorganisms, it came to my mind that we are going to cover the bloodborne pathogens conditions also. Then health impacts of biological hazards. They can pose a threat to human health when they are inhaled, eaten, or come in contact with skin. So inhalation is the main source of these hazards, as we know that viruses and bacteria are very small in size, and it can be inhaled, and it is also can be transferred from one guy to another guy, or from animal to human beings, as we have seen from last 2 years. The press release and the briefing of WHO, we have enough awareness about COVID-19 spread and its various categories and vectors. They have a micro level size, so it cannot be seen from the naked eye. And examples of viruses is, you know that COVID-19 is a virus, and bacteria, we have an example of anthrax. Anthrax is a bacterial infection or virus, which is a bacteria, and anthrax, and it is also spread deliberately, and it is spread in case of anthrax. We have a few example of anthrax infection, and few of the notorious organizations has spread it deliberately. We can discuss it later on. Then we have illnesses such as food poisoning, tetanus, respiratory infections, or parasite infections. You must be aware about tetanus conditions, because there is some injection associated with that. Then we have physical hazards and its health impacts. Physical hazards we have already discussed before: noise, radiation, and heat, and the cold, energy. And here we have energy can enter into our body. It can enter through our skin, that is heat, cold, vibration, radiation, electric shock, through our ears, noise, music, shouting, or through our eyes, light, lasers, and sunlight. So there are most of the workplace conditions or industries has these kind of physical hazards, in which noise is the most prominent one, I would say. And excessive energy exposure can cause pain and injury. If exposure occurs day after day, we may develop a disease and possibility a disability. For example, if the exposure is continuous and it is in the routine, so you can develop a chronic effect. Then we have a health impacts of physical hazard. We have a noise, as we have seen, hearing loss, stress, annoyance, hand arm vibration, white finger hand arm vibration syndrome. These are the types of ergonomic hazard associated with hand and arm vibration. Whole body vibration is back disorder, the disorder of the lower back, dislocation of the discs, and wide range of health conditions are associated with it. Hot environment, heat stroke, heat syncope, fainting, heat stress. It is related to the heat stress. And cold environment, hypothermia. Last week, we had a tragedy in our country where there were few fatalities, and the main cause of those fatalities were hypothermia. And then we have a frostbite, trench foot. Then we have retinal damage caused by light, laser, slip, trips, and fall is a normal hazard at any workplace. Even at our home, we may face these kind of hazards. Then we have fires, burns, inhalation of toxic fumes, and radiation. Radiation sickness within hours or days after exposure to very high radiation levels. Cancer after several years of low level exposure. So it is the type of exposure, the amount of exposure, the length of time a person is exposed to. These kind of condition can cause this kind of environment can cause a condition which is chronic and which takes years to cure. Then we have ergonomic hazard and its health impacts. As we have, I have told before, our bodies normally recover from wear and tear of work after a period of rest. But if the stresses continue day after day without time to recover, the damage can lead to ergonomic injuries. Many different terms are used to describe these ergonomic injuries. For example, few of them are cumulative trauma disorder. Ergonomic injuries involve strain that may develop or accumulate. Repetitive strain injuries, ergonomic injuries that are often caused by repeating the same motion over and over. That is caused by the workers who are sitting in the counter of the mall, and when our customer comes and going to check out from that counter, the guy who is sitting at a counter and counting all the items you have purchased, he is going to do the same repetitive motion of the in same order. And also another example is using the mouse with that when you are working with your desktop computer or laptop. So if you are not changing your posture, if you are not changing your position of hand, you may develop tingling sensation in your small finger and also in your wrist. Numbness of your fingers also associated with that. Musculoskeletal disorder, ergonomic injuries affect the muscle, bone, tendons, nerves, and tissues. As in the picture, you can see the guy sitting in the chair, which is not seems to be very comfortable, and his back is going to be affected if he's sitting like this for a long period of time. So usually we recommend the workers how to save themselves from any MSGs. So he has to change his posture, he has to work out, he has to inspect his workstation, the sitting posture, the working periods, and how long he is working in the same conditions. So several in between breaks we recommend to those workers in order to give some time, relaxation time to his eyes, his hands, his back, his tendons, and his legs. He should move around, take a deep breath, and also avoid staring the screen, laptop screen or desktop screen, and use the protection screen as it relates to the dryness of eyes. So all these ergonomic hazards, ergonomic conditions are associated with improper body posture of the worker who are sitting for a prolonged period of time. And and mostly they are developed in those workers. Then these disorders include number of specific diseases such as carpal tunnel syndrome, bursitis, and tendinitis. Back injuries are the most common and mostly costly MSTs. As I have explained in the previous slide, the back injuries are most common, and most workers are prone to these back injuries because whenever we assess the workplace conditions and the workers, we take the history of the worker who is sitting and who has the problem of this, such as his body weight, his the way he is sitting in the chair, the type and of the chair he is using, the height of the table and the chair, leg support, lumbar support, and number of breaks he is taking in between, and what is the level and what is the posture of his neck, because what is the level of his eyesight staring at the display screen. All these conditions are assessed and noted down in the assessment regime whenever we go for ergonomics assessment. Symptoms of these disorder are most common in back. As I have explained, this is the narration of the same thing, that mostly affected areas are backs, hand, arm, wrist, elbows, neck, and shoulders. They include soreness or pain, stiffness, swelling, loss of coordination, numbness, especially in fingers, tingling sensation as their area, as though the area is asleep, unexplained weaknesses. Then we have one more hazard, which is called psychological hazards and its health impacts. I would say this psychological impacts is the least concerned in case of the employers, in case of the management, because least concerned in case they are not going to give a certain amount of attention which is required by this kind of hazard, because it is a fact and it is there in every second workplace, not in every workplace, not in every job area, not in every boss, not in every management is ideal in terms of the workload, in terms of the appreciation given, and in terms of the reward which is given to the workers for their job. Because whenever you go for the workplace, 8 hours, whether it is 8 hours workplace or 12-hour workplace, you are spending most of your daily routine, daily life in your office. So that office, that workplace, that organization should be free from all these psychological hazards. So it is the most commonly used for those hazards that can have an impact on psychological health or mental or emotional well-being of a person. So some of the psychological hazards that may exist at the workplace, that all staff have an obligation under Section 19 of WHS Act to manage as far as it is practical are work-related stress, bullying and harassment, lone or remote working, violence in the workplace, both from staff and students, fatigue and alcohol and drug use. So these are few of the type of psychological hazards which are present or which might be present at any workplace. So exposure to psychological hazards and risk factors has been linked to long-term physical health issues, which can increase muscle tension and the load on musculoskeletal system, leading to MSD, musculoskeletal disorder. So ergonomic hazard, MSD is an ergonomic hazard. And here we have seen, and from the experience, we have also witnessed and we have also experienced that psychological hazard has the effect on musculoskeletal system. So if your workplace, if your condition of sitting, if your working hours is not appropriate, and if you are not ergonomically safe or not ergonomically feasibly sitting and working on your environment, and if your working environment is also has long-term physical conditions like the tension is there in your working environment, your boss is bullying their workers and their subordinates without any reason, and there is no appreciation of any good work is going on. So all these conditions add to MSD conditions. So if an assessor, if a consultant is assessing the ergonomic condition, he has to take some weightage, and he has to take care, and he has to assess the psychological hazards also, in addition to ergonomics hazard in the workplace, because it is also linked with the ergonomic hazard. So affect biochemical pathways. What it do, it actually it affects the biochemical pathways in our bodies, releasing or suppressing hormones which may have an impact on aspects of physical health. So whenever a human being, whether he or she is working in any kind of workplace, and if that workplace has routinely like we have covered in the previous slide, like the stresses, work-related stresses is there, the bullying and harassment kind of condition is there, lone or remote working conditions, violence in a workplace is a normal thing. So all of these conditions aggravate and contribute to the effect in which the human body is going to react in the way it releases certain suppressing hormones, which can have effect on the physical health of the body. Then we have next upcoming webinar, we will explain and we will further go into the explanation of chemical hazards and its control measures. This webinar, which is our upcoming and future webinar, will go further deep into the chemical hazards of certain chemicals which are very, very dangerous in terms of cancer causing and other chronic and acute severity, and how these chemicals are, if present at the workplace, are accessed, and how the control measures are applied to control these chemicals and control the hazards of these chemicals, the severity of these chemicals, and how to save our people and our workers from the severe hazards of these chemicals, how the severity of these chemicals are determined, how these chemicals are classified on the basis of their severity, and how the control measures are applied in the real scenario with examples, and how these control measures are when implemented are effective in the from experience and from the you can say real-time experience and real-time examples of the industry which has applied certain number of control measures to contain these kind of chemical hazards. It also related to the process related chemicals. It is also related to the storage of these chemicals. It also related to the handling of these chemicals, and also obviously will give some advices which will also help you in picking up the industry and your future. So coming over to questions and answers, if you have, I would like to welcome the questions and answer if you have one by one. And if there is no question and answer, we can conclude this webinar today.
Hello.
Yes, please.